Should we talk about giant touchscreens doing data visualizations on live cable news?
Yeah.
It is better than when they tried to pretend they were in the screen before, and they were just kind of like, and it would be wrong.
Yeah, there's been a weird shift away from the weatherman style of I'm on a green screen and pretending that I'm waving around inside a computer, and it's more just like, here's a giant television that we're shooting with a camera.
Well, it's funny because Gina and I were talking about this last night at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and she said that job, like being the screen guy, is maybe her dream job because it's like math. It's all the things that she likes to do, like weird math on the spot. You got to do it really fast. It's like being in like a high school math competition or something. And I was thinking as she was saying this, I was like, I want to be the person that's directing these shows and that's feeding them line. Like I want to be Albert Brooks in broadcast news back in the background, dumping lines into people's head and stuff like that, and just riding that wave of hype all night long.
It's almost turning into like a competition at this point, like the John King, Steve Kornacki arms race. Like MSNBC was like straight up posting Twitter clips of Kornacki like doing crazy math in his head and stuff like that. It was just like they are just in some sort of weird data visualization, polling, aggregation arms race at this point.
Well, and it's not like it's difficult math. It's only difficult math when it's 3 a.m. and you've only slept like 6 hours in the last 72 hours or something like that. But
I've straight up seen people tracking the lack of clothes changing in guys like that, and like the person running the count in Philadelphia or whatever. It's like, yeah, that guy's been wearing the same shirt and blazer for the last 3 days. I'm not sure if he's gone home yet.
You know, the other change in all the broadcast news. Have you noticed? I don't think they did it this time, but do you remember when they used to have chairs on broadcast news and suddenly all the sets went to like, let's stand on the set?
I feel like a lot of them have. So like the screen guy has to be standing. He's got to get back and forth from that big surface over to the. You'll notice Microsoft didn't sponsor this one, by the way. Like last go around, they sponsored. And I think it associated surfaces with like a lot of people's worst night of their lives.
You really don't want to form. That is the worst possible brand association that you could ever form.
Hey, you know what I would do if I were Microsoft, though, for Surface? Here's my suggestion. You sign Bill Belichick as a spokesperson now.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because it's just like, you know what, Bill Belichick, even people in Boston will fire you in a season. But so you need some money now. And we want to make you our, the inappropriate word these days. But, you just want to like, you hate it on Surface. You're now our official spokesperson for the NFL. You see Belichick there just kind of sulking and like, I like Surface. I use it all the time.
If you're going to do that, you might as well go all the way and make him the official computer of the Houston Astros, too. It's like, hey, look, we've moved at one level deeper. We don't need to bang trash cans to cheat effectively anymore. We're just going to get out there and we're going to write down the secret signs on the surface and hold them up in the outfield so that the guy behind plate can see what's going on.
I don't even want to consider how much hate mail we're going to get over this. Like I muted the sports channel on the Discord for a reason.
You got to say, it's like, hey, we got the TV here. Why don't we just pass that information on? Hey, that's a good idea. That's pretty impressive for some jocks to figure out. You got to say,
Ooh, okay, now we
see. Now we crossed it over.
Move it over. Let's start the show.
We got to quit while we're behind.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
And today we have a very special guest.
A gusty guest.
My dear friend, former colleague from the old Maximum PC days, Gordon Mong, now of PC World, and you may know him from the Full Nerd podcast. Welcome, Gordon. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's let's say we're recording on Friday morning.
It's a week. It's been a week.
I feel like I could have a beer, actually. I was thinking nice.
8 a.m. beer.
Yeah. But yeah, welcome to the show, Gordon. We brought you in this week because like there's been a bunch of stuff happening on PC hardware in the last couple of weeks with the AMD stuff specifically, and I know some of it you can't talk about, but like we wanted to kind of check in on the state of the CPU post the Ryzen launch a few weeks ago, now that some benchmarks are starting to come out and stuff like that. And also to talk about the new GPUs that AMD announced I think last week, but it feels like about 100 years ago.
Time
crazy,
might as well
right?
not exist at this point.
Yeah, no, it's the everybody basically, because due to our current world events, everybody's just launching parts whenever they want to. There's no more schedules or no more timing around. So it's been a crush for everybody who does it, looks at hardware for a living. But I think that probably the best way to describe, Ryzen 5000 Zen 3 is it's hard to believe that AMD could crush Intel's parts even more because, frankly, Ryzen 3000 was already very, very impressive, right? First 16 core, true consumer part. And now they've come back, new cores. They've said we're going to hit this performance. And for the most part, they have hit it or exceeded it as far as I've seen. And one thing that probably people are not seeing that are not actual hardware reviewers that are not exposed to all the reviews documents is they played it very, very conservatively.
Really?
I thought, yeah.
You mean in the numbers they put out?
Yes. So hey, so typically you will get vendors like, here is a sanity check number. It basically run this test, this benchmark on your machine. If your machine is not hitting this number, call us, because then you have screwed something up or something is wrong, right? And
Yeah.
I do this, with Intel, I do it with the AMD, and you should just do it because so for one of these, it's Cinebench. It's like, okay, you should hit X number in, Cinebench, single thread. Okay. Hey, I'm there, right? So you're saying, I think 640, I'm getting 639. They're like, oh, you should be higher than that. We're like, what? They're like, yeah, we played it very conservative. You should be at least, So they basically said they talked to the motherboard vendor. They got me a new BIOS. And actually, it's like, this actually brings the performance of this board in line with the other boards out there. And all of that, I had to throw away everything I'd already done because I'd started it because it was within 1% of what they had said it would be, just to get 1.5% higher, right?
So,
and it's just because they wanted to be higher.
So this, I have two questions, and one is kind of like a meta, what it's like to test during quarantine. But I'm curious, like, this is when I told people we're going to talk about this today in our Discord. One of the big questions they had was about memory compatibility. They had a lot of questions about reliability with Ryzen, because I know the first gen parts had some problems. It seemed to me that most of that stuff cleared up with the second gen, especially if you were careful to stay on the RAM vendor list. But because AMD is supporting motherboards for so long, like, can you end up in a situation where you have a motherboard that's theoretically supported, but is actually, impacting your performance because it's not, it's 3 years old and you're not getting the BIOS updates you want or something like that. That seems like a real concern.
Well, I think most of it is not really you're going to see a drop off in performance. That's typically more motivated by, you went out and bought a cheap motherboard. The VRMs can't put out the voltage to really hit super high clocks. And that's probably what's going to impact your performance more of memory timings and those things. I think more of it is, people like, hey, I bought the original AM4 socket, X370 or whatever, and I can run the newest things. Like, well, not necessarily. There is just some boards where you just can't drop in a Ryzen 3000. There was a big, huge, kerfuffle over, some old 400 series boards that they were going to, like, we're going to leave you behind. And those people said, no, don't leave us behind. And AMD actually, to their credit, came back and said, yeah, okay, we're going to support it. Although it is a serious pain in the butt to try to support older motherboards with new CPUs. And it's one of the reasons why Intel doesn't do it is because now you've got this, like, you've got consumers like, we don't know what works with what. And then you've got people returning stuff, RMAing stuff. And then you've got to qual all this stuff. It really gets to be a mess. AMD, this is actually a weakness for AMD for a long time because people tout like, wow, this is awesome that they can do all this in AM4. It really, truly is amazing to get the amount of CPU generations and performance improvements in the same socket. But the reason they do this is because in the old days, like, like, hey, AMD's like, we want to do a new socket for a new Athlon FX part or whatever it is, right? And like, you're not going to waste time for this because no one's buying your stuff, right? And that's honest truth. Like, board vendors, like, we're not going to, they don't have the gravity to move things. Like, Intel would just say, hey, we're coming out with a new socket. to match our
Deal.
new CPU. Like, hey, you're selling 80%. Probably at one point it was 90% of CPUs sold into the entire market.
Yeah,
we're going to do it. We have to, right? And honestly, we like selling new motherboards, not having people buy, try to use the old ones. So I think it's just sort of conditioned to AMD, like that once was really a major weakness is now turned into a major strength because, for nerds like us, we love being able to just swap the CPU out.
Yeah.
Realistically, consumers don't ever do it. 99% of people don't do it. But for nerds, it's like so valuable. So,
sorry, I'm just going to jump in here.
Ahead,
this was one of my kind of later questions, but I'm just going to bring it up now since you're talking about it. So looking at AMD's roadmap, I believe they've said that this is probably the last chip on AM4. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, no, and it makes sense because, they have said publicly, we need a major change. Right, we're not just going to break it for like they went from 400 to 500 PCIe 4. You got PCIe 4 with 5. So with AM, whatever the new socket will be, I'm thinking AM5 makes sense. You're going to have DDR4, potentially PCIe 5. So I've been saying AM5 with PCIe 5 and DDR5. So when you have a major memory change. It's okay. Most people admit it's okay. And, this hasn't always been the case because you had motherboard vendors try to make a DDR with DDR2 motherboard. And those things are just terrible, but people don't like to.
Gordon, do you remember that one that had both slots? You could put SDR and DDR RAM on?
Yeah.
Those were
there's just
mess.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a huge compatibility issues, but memory is it's very slow to change.
So if somebody wants to buy a Ryzen machine, buy memory off if you're coming into Ryzen right now, it's safe to, new boards coming, you're probably still safe to buy. Just buy memory off the list and buy one of the current gen boards and you're going to be okay, right?
Yeah, of course, if you want to be, a safety Sally, yeah, you're definitely going to go off the QVL list, qualified vendor list of memory. Those are the modules that they've found. But if you're building, and again, it depends on your audience. If you're some hardcore YouTuber doing extreme overclocking with liquid nitrogen, that's a different world than I'm going to build a box off of parts on Newegg or Amazon. You go out and buy a X570 board, you go out and buy a 5900X, and you basically buy any name brand memory, which pretty much it's going to work. Because they're the JEDEC specs. They basically, if you're gonna hit the JEDEC specs, it's always going to work with JEDEC specs. It's really the going beyond the JEDEC specs that's the problem.
Are the XMP profiles typically above those specs? Is that actually technically, like I've always thought of the XMP as the baseline, but is that actually out of spec for what you're supposedly getting out of the box?
XMP is actually beyond JEDEC generally.
Interesting.
But, some of them can be potentially within, but they'll have generally like 2 profiles, right? And typically, the higher A profile will be beyond the official JEDEC spec for it. But I do want to say this because people, I continue to hear this, especially as you get to more. Let's face it, and this is what AMD fans don't understand is AMD has just stunk it up. Prior to Ryzen, they just stunk it up for 10 years, right? And people, when it gets to that point, like what, I'm never going to buy a Fiat in my life. That Fiat was the worst car I've ever had. Whereas suddenly Fiat's making the best damn car in the world. It's hard for people to go like, well, I had a Fiat. Well, that was like 10 years ago, man. That thing was a piece of junk, So
this tracks. I mean, this is going to be a very self-serving part of this podcast, but this tracks
and
very
much. Not a Fiat. Sorry, don't want to say that because Fiat's Fiat.
Like what you just said tracks 1-to-1 with my experience over the last 20-ish years. Like from the Duron 600 to some kind of Athlon 64, I was a diehard AMD guy. That Athlon 64 was what was it? FX after that? That's what
right? I mean, it's just one of those things you don't even remember them. You don't reserve brain space to remember their brands. So, at a certain point, right?
2010 is literally when I fell off of AMD and bought a Core i7-860, and I've been Intel since then. And now I'm sitting here looking at these Ryzens again, like, okay, maybe it's time to jump back over again. But here's the question I want to ask you, or one of many questions. I'm on a 7700K right now, and I thought it was kind of okay. And then Watch Dogs Legion came on, and that was a pretty rude awakening in terms of what my CPU is able to do at this point. So I'm looking at the Zen 3s, thinking about getting back in, but like you said, one of the big selling points of AMD at this point is like, I buy a motherboard right now, I've got an upgrade path for X number of years. Like that's not going to be the case right now, right? Because
no,
it sounds like these boards that are out that accommodate a Zen 3 chip right now, that's it, right? Like you're not going to have any more.
For the love of God, don't encourage him to wait, please.
Yeah, no, I mean,
no, that's not my. But that is the case, right?
Yeah, it is the case that the AM4 argument. This is gonna. I mean, 99%. Will be the last new CPU AM4 sees. You never know. DDR5 could hit serious, launch and yield issues, and then maybe they say, you know what, we're going to do you don't know. But yeah, if you wait, it always gets better. But
really,
you can wait infinitely, right?
God
you
damn
can
it, Will.
infinitely wait.
I'm not saying I'm going to wait. I just want to know what I'm getting into. Do you see any mid-generation like Zen 3 refresh on another socket, or is this kind of 1-to-1? You think?
I think so. They said Zen 4 is on the way. That'll be hopefully 5 nanometer. The general roadmap is 2021 to 2022.
Okay,
kind of
so
thing.
That's a ways off then.
It's a ways off, and I think again you're getting stupidly. God, I hate the if you always wait, it'll get better. But you never want to be caught. Never want to be the last person on the old part, right? That happened with Intel. If you had a 9900K and you bought a 900K, that was it. You never you couldn't run the new 10900K. I would say though, these parts, I mean, 7700K for most games is going to be fine. And, generally a GPU upgrade is better most of the time. But if that game is really running out of gas, I'll have to fire it up. I just finally got a code for it, but
it's pretty CPU-y, especially if you turn everything up.
Watch Dogs is an outlier. Like, we'll see how Cyberpunk does, and like what else, Assassins and Call of Duty. Like, it may just be a Watch Dogs thing, not a slower CPU thing. I'm not sure.
Well,
yeah, I go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, one of the big questions for me is with new consoles coming out right now that have a much larger number of cores than we're used to, like this, I'm really curious to see what that's going to do to performance on this next wave of like AAA games. And my guess is it probably isn't going to impact this first year crop of titles as much as it does next year and the year after, especially. But like with the way ray tracing works and the way it changes the way the rendering pipeline works, so that you're not really fill rate dependent anymore. You're entirely dependent on how much math you can do per frame and how many light sources there are, much more than like how many pixels are on the screen. We're in a real, like, benchmarking is going to get real weird over the next few years, I think.
Yeah. And, I think I'm with you. I generally, because, this has been something, this is not new, right? People say, well, we've got Ryzen, you've got 8 cores costing basically, nothing, under $200. We got new consoles. It's going to change everything. Well, I'm extremely skeptical of that because I heard the same old line with the 8-core consoles. Remember, you had 8-core consoles. My God, this is going to change PC gaming. It didn't. Those weren't exactly hot cores in those consoles. But I fundamentally think one of the problems, even for AAA, is, you know what? I love making AAA games. I also like making a lot of money. I'm going to sell this game. Am I really going to leave those with a quad-core CPU?
How much of the market is quad-core?
Yeah.
And, as much as the PC has moved forward a lot recently, you still got a lot, and I've been saying this for a little bit now, but, the PC strength is legacy and the PC's weakness is its legacy, right? Because, and the same thing with Windows. They like, hey, what? You're going to drop off this support for this thing that only 5 people in the world use? We're going to come, we're going to march on Redmond. Same thing with hardware. I don't really believe they can just simply go, yeah, we're going to leave everybody behind. I'm sure
totally right.
They'll just turn off features, right? They'll probably turn off features. But
if you look at the Steam hardware surveys, like time after time, they bear out exactly what you're saying. So
like a 6600K is still the median CPU on Steam hardware survey last time I looked.
1060, 1650, like cards like that dominate the GPU lists by like an order of magnitude. So yeah, we're just nerds and we like to think that we have the best thing under the sun. So how many of the Ryzen 5000 series have you gotten your hands on personally?
So I originally, another sort of inside baseball thing, they are extremely sophisticated with how they put spins on everything. So in previous launch, you might get like, hey, we're going to send you, all 4, right? There's 4 parts here, but you basically sample the ones that you want to so you want to shape the coverage, you ship one part out. So this time, the vast majority of people got the 12 core and 16 core Ryzen, the Ryzen 9s, which frankly are the ones I'm excited about because I love big fat hairy hardware.
Yeah.
I didn't get the 6 core, I didn't get the 8 core until yesterday. So they launched yesterday. I got them yesterday because if you're AMD, you go like, you know what? If you want to just put that knife into Intel's back and turn it, you show off 16 core, 12 core performance, and it just crushes them like, single threaded, multi-threaded, where it's 70% to 20%, right? You look at those lower end parts where you're looking at a Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, where it's really an 8 versus 8 and a 6 versus 6. I can tell you Ryzen's still likely, I haven't tested them yet, but you're still going to accept probably at least 20% faster, probably across the board, maybe a little bit better. That's not as impressive as, 20% to 70%, 20% to say 25% or 30%. That's good, but it doesn't give you the same messaging as like, they will crush them no matter what, but it just sort of it shows. And I don't know, Will, you probably haven't looked at too much hardware lately, sort of like caught up in that whole reviewers being manipulated.
I spent some time with like 3080s, and I spent a lot of time with those 300 hertz monitors that NVIDIA just rolled out.
Those are awesome. But you'll notice the timing on when reviewers get hardware is part of the PR marketing, right? And it's so sophisticated now because they know if they only give these to you, you're going to look at them.
I suspect that they even look at like yield sometimes and think about like how the chips are binning and like which of these things do we want to move into the market hard and which ones do we want to kind of slow play because we're going to have trouble getting them out. And it seems like one of the things that's happened since I left Maximum PC and stopped doing a lot of hardware stuff is we've gotten much better as a society at like binning hardware and designing stuff that we can actually manufacture in mass. Because you don't often, pandemic aside, see like a new hardware launch roll out and all of a sudden they're selling a bazillion more of the thing than they can actually manufacture. But yeah, the kind of whole the PR cycle for this stuff is the thing that struck me coming back into this when we started the tech pod is how much that's changed and how much more savvy they are, how much more engaged with the enthusiasts they are. And honestly, like how much more transparent they are about, like, I was shocked when we went to those NVIDIA briefs for the 3000 series. I was shocked at how transparent NVIDIA was with like the things that they thought were good and the things that they thought were bad. Cause like the thing is with all the people that are doing this now and the sophistication of the folks from YouTube to Digital Trends to whatever, Digital Foundry to whatever, like they can't get away with being sneaky anymore. Like we used to have to detective some stuff out at Max PC, and like there's enough people working on it now that somebody will figure it out across the board. So
yeah, no, it's insane. It's everything from the reviewers. I feel like an old person, and I am an old person versus like, Steve Burke at Gamers Nexus. He was like, he's doing like pressure traces where he got pressure sensitive paper and he's looking at CPU and GPU mounts. And then he's looking at basically sort of like, then he can 3D model on that because he's calibrated the paper. So then he can 3D model the pressure traces for how you've mounted that CPU cooler and then take it off.
Gamers Nexus feels like it came out of nowhere, and just like the amount of sheer ingenuity that I see going into the tests that they're doing is like kind of insane. From like testing water loops and looking for behavior that nobody else is catching and stuff like that. Like they really are hitting it.
I love Steve. He's awesome.
The first one of his videos I saw, I was like, man, this guy's crazy. And then I like watched the video and I was like, oh man, like I wish we had him 15 years ago at Max PC. He would have been a monster.
I think, Steve, he is a fan. A lot of the younger people actually, and I'll say this to old man Will and old man Gordon, but a lot of these people, Max PC boot, they were just huge fans of it because if you think about it, there were very few print publications that actually flew the flag for what nerds cared about in PCs, right? So I think in some way it's really kind of good because at least what we put on paper back then, 15 years ago, is sort of inspired a lot of kids. Now they're doing their awesome stuff. Like, oh, I'm an old person.
Not to make excuses for our nonsense back then. So I learned how to build a PC from Tom's Hardware and that boot build a PC guide in like 1997. Those were the two sources I used when I put together my K62. And the thing about moving over and working at Max PC was that it became clear that a lot of what we could do was entirely gated by like the fact that it was going to fit into like 1,500 words, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't, like, there was stuff that, like, when we did smoke testing and, you know, evacuated the building a couple of times and like tried to do latency testing in 2008 and couldn't afford a high-speed camera because like it was going to be a 300-word blurb in the bottom of some article.
Right.
Like I'm envious of, hey, here's how much money we're going to make on this YouTube video, so here's how much we can spend, and that stuff being relatively kind of flat, it would have made things a little bit easier. Anyway,
as well as the tools too. The tools today are so sophisticated, right? I mean, like you said, like I always think that like that smoke test where Brad may have not heard this story. We took a system and we basically put plexi on the side of it, and then we took pictures as we blew simulated smoke through the case.
Gordon had his fog machine and brought it into the
so we brought the fog machine in, and then when you could see, of course, the smoke would just stall out near the PCI cards, PCI, of course, and of course, I remember like, hey,
literally,
I think it was
as you were firing up the smoke machine, I was like, hey, there's smoke detectors in here. You don't think this stuff will trip the smoke detectors, do you?
It'll be fine.
You're like, nah, it's fine. Let's just forgiveness, not permission. And then the next thing we know, we had the whole building evacuated and the fire trucks were on their way.
So it's when you
you know the dumber thing, though? No, see, Brad doesn't know the actual dumb story. So the actual dumb story is, I don't know how these smoke detectors work. Do you think they're going to key off the particles? Oh, you must work off smoke. This isn't smoke. It's just fog. Well, you know what? Here is the dumb thing. Now, Will may not remember this. Hey, let's ask the facilities person how the smoke detectors work. She's like, well, I don't know, but don't do it then, because
her spidey sense tingled hard.
It probably just don't do it. What are you, stupid? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then there's like, let's do it anyway. And that's when we set off the smoke detectors on an entire building. So
the whole forgiveness, not permission philosophy is great right up until it's the county that you're having to ask for forgiveness, and then it might be a little bit of a problem.
The fire truck did roll up for that. So
they were used to it by then, because you guys had done the fire safe test with the kerosene soaked Duraflame logs a few months before that. So when you melted the asphalt in the parking lot or whatever,
that's amazing.
A gallon of gas and five Duraflame logs, one small 2-pound extinguisher will not put out.
That sounds like a party to me. So so just real quick rundown for people who don't remember all this stuff. There are 4 Ryzen 5000s that have just come out. There's 6, 8, 12, and 16 cores. The prices are $299, $449, $549, $799 correspondingly. I kind of wanted to ask, in your opinion, for like your average use case, gaming, light, productivity, whatever, like what do you think is the sweet spot there in this new lineup?
Well, it's clearly going to be that $299. The Ryzen 5 comes with a cooler. It's just, for most people, you're doing Photoshop, even frankly, Premiere. You're not doing heavy. It's like, and if you're sort of like a 75% gaming box, come on, that's all you need. It's really sort of, I think, where...
Is that the 6-core one?
Yeah, that's 6 cores.
Yeah. It's more than enough for most people.
Interesting. Because, and this might be facile. Like, this is probably a simplified understanding of how multi-core software works. But, I'm looking at the consoles and going, well, those have 8 cores, so I should probably get at least 8 on the PC. But that's not quite how it works from the sound of it.
I will welcome the day when I am wrong and say you don't need an 8-core CPU to play, because I wish for that forever.
Because that'll mean they'll be doing way more interesting and high-powered stuff, right?
Yeah. So there means actually game developers have decided to take full advantage of all the PC firepower we've had for a long time. And the reason I'm always so skeptical is Intel used to go out and literally pay developers to support their 6-core CPUs, Gulftown, Westmere, right? They paid them, write them to support it, and then they're like, look, it works. This was like 2012 or something, 10 years ago.
Well, it's really hard. Multi-threaded stuff, and game renders are mostly single-threaded is the thing. So you can break out the sound, you can break out the physics, but you run out of things to break out around 4 or 5 cores, and then after that, who knows? I'm curious. Have you, as somebody who does a lot of benchmarking, have you found new workloads that are actually consumer workloads for 10, 12 core CPUs, aside from the old school, hey man, your 4K video, if I'm doing 4K video edits, it's pretty much the only thing that spikes my 9900K. Yeah, all the cores on, and for enough time that it's worth having 8 cores with 16 threads, right? Yeah. Are you seeing stuff beyond video and like CAD stuff and, Cinebench and those types of benchmarks?
Not really. The best case you can argue is, as you're saying, is video editing encodes. Even they are sort of tops out. You don't need a Threadripper, 32 core CPU for that, but
machine learning stuff. If you're a scientist,
Office,
I guess, right?
No, yeah. And this is the one play that Intel's betting on. AI, kind of interesting. They're doing all their interesting, different things branded under DL Boost. But if you look on the Intel on a desktop side, is just plain done.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm just going to use this podcast as an excuse to ask you every question I can think of because you
on
live
laptops though.
But
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask what you think about like that Rocket Lake announcement for next spring that happened a week or two ago. So it seems pretty underwhelming. Like, what's your general like state of the union for Intel right now? Like, where are they going?
I think Intel they have too many enemies to fight. They have too many mouths to feed, and I think they're just trying to. Desktops, as much as all us nerds and Discord and Reddit get totally like, oh my God, over 16-core Ryzen, the vast majority of humans use laptops.
Like laptops with 4 cores and 16 gigs of memory, right?
Yeah, and Intel, basically, they want to defend data center, which is all the money. Their problem there is AMD or NVIDIA, and then they want to defend laptops, which is AMD has got stellar products on as well. But on desktop, Rocket Lake will be, the rumors are basically they're going to take Ice Lake, microarchitecture, backported onto 14 nanometer because they can't make enough 10 nanometer parts. But you take 10 nanometer, a design made for 10 nanometer, and you're going to stuff it onto 14 nanometer. Yeah, maybe you can get to better clocks because Ice Lake could not. New Tiger Lake 11th gen can, but it's still 14 nanometer. They're not going to get the core density that AMD has. So I think probably what's going to happen is you're going to see basically the microarchitecture they're using now, which is essentially Skylake plus. You're going to see a really decent, IPC increase. So they'll get closer to what we're seeing out of Zen 3. I don't know if it'll be better.
Sorry, IPC?
Instructions per clock, right? So I think they're going to get better on that efficiency. And, actually, the whole IPC thing doesn't really mean what it used to mean when, really smart people would yell at us in the 90s and say, well, that's not how you measure IPC. Because people now, AMD's definition is we take 20 applications, we lock all the CPUs at 4 gigahertz, and we look at, well, in the old days, they used to say, well, you got to use, this, you got to use this spec thing, and you got to it really was like high-end computer scientist kind of stuff. But now it's really gotten very loose with IPC. But really, it comes down to efficiency per clock, right?
Okay.
So Rocket League will get them closer. May not beat them. Maybe it will beat them. But that's only in lightly threaded stuff. And AMD's just going to bash their heads in still with 12 and 16 cores.
Sure.
So Rocket Lake is not going to save them, but it may stem some of the bleeding.
So again, self-serving here because I want to know what to get, but I'm doing a lot, we're work from home right now. Like I'm doing a ton of streaming. Like I am doing a lot of playing games on this PC and like streaming them out at the same time. Is like the 12 core overkill for my use case?
I don't think so. I think 12 is like, honestly, I think for the average, and when I say 6 core, I mean, that's for your average person. They're doing Office, they're playing games.
Yeah.
Like if I were to build my son a machine right now or my daughter, I would be a 6 core machine. I'm not going to pay for 12. For me, I would definitely pay for the 12. I think the 12 is a stellar. It's really a great place to be. 16 is awesome, but I don't do 3D modeling at home. I don't do 50 million things at once. I think 12 is a really good place to be.
Yeah, my guess, 16 sounds like it is overkill. Is that generally the case? Also, and then kind of a related question, I noticed that the base clock on the 16 is a good bit lower. And does that impact anything much?
So the base clock is really sort of, you're not generally going to hit it. I mean, I suppose you have to sort of think of, so the problem with the 16 core AM4 part is if you look at some of the performance tests we did, you see when you put it against the older 16 core part, it's a huge difference in that sort of lightly threaded single core stuff. As you get to the middle, it's still better, but you get to the right side, it's still faster, but it's not that huge margin. You're seeing 16 core versus 16 core. And the main reason, even according to AMD, is we're just power limited. You got 16 cores. If you're really using all 16 cores at 100% for 25 an hour, it's a 105 watt part. This isn't a Threadripper. Their answer is like, if you really need 16 cores for 2 hours or 4 hours at a time, go out and buy a Threadripper. We got 32 core parts. We got 64 core parts. That's really, and they just have a lot. It's a bigger socket. There's more memory channels. That's really the tool to use. So I that's what I would argue.
And there are no Zen 3 based Threadrippers announced yet, right? No, I'm not. I don't need a Threadripper. I'm just curious.
Not yet, but I mean,
Brad,
think about that though.
You need a Threadripper, Brad.
If these cores are essentially power constrained in a 16 core version, you take these suckers and you put them into a next generation Threadripper, it's going to light things on fire, right? I mean, like the benchmarks. It's just going to be incredible, right? So you just sort of take the shackles off of the power and thermals that you get out of the Threadripper platform, and it's going to be, whew.
That's exciting.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Can we switch over to GP? I think we've hit everything important you got one more?
I could keep asking questions for a while. I haven't been. This is just in general. Like this is the most exciting that PC hardware has been to me in I don't know how long. Like 15 years awesome. Probably. Just CPUs and GPUs. It's crazy. What else was I going to ask? Do you have any experience with graphite thermal pads? I haven't actually talked to anybody who has used them firsthand. And like I imagine with the amount of CPU swapping back and forth that you have to do, I was wondering if those have come in handy for you.
I do not use them. I mean, I do know it's of course that people, especially enthusiasts are always looking for the next cool exotic thing. Liquid metal I think is probably what a lot of people use, but those graphite pads look sexy. So I look
at my thermal pad a lot, Gordon. I want it to look really nice. I find it's important to have an attractive thermal pad.
I want a nice sheen on it.
That is what's so cool about I don't it's like it really felt like that would be like exotic. This is stuff that NASA had in the 2000s. Yeah. Like, hey, I just ordered this off of eBay, right?
Yeah. Look, you can get all sorts of crazy stuff from AliExpress. I got replacement mouse switches the other day that are like high performance mouse switches, and all I have to do is wait a month and they show up, and
No, it really is a different world. What are some of the less obvious workloads that would show off having a ton of cords? No, I'm just looking at some of the questions, but that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the big one. I had a question. Like,
I wish, right? I wish.
I mean, I think streaming is a good example actually, because I know like all of my streamer friends have switched from Intel machines with a second. A lot of them have switched from Intel machines with a second machine to do the encode and run OBS that they pipe out across via HDMI. And now a lot of them are just using a like 16 core Ryzen single stream PC because it's way simpler to do everything on the same PC and let OBS just grab from the frame buffer.
Yeah, I mean, just think of what it's just amazing because you can just the core count that you can get. But I mean, even that's, I think the one thing that I really like about Zen 3 is it felt like, I mean, to the external world, it felt like we were just making excuses because clearly when Ryzen first came out, Intel was kicking into AMD's butt in gaming still. 20% is nothing to like that. They were still better in gaming. But then you sort of like, well, AMD's argument is like, well, you're playing these games, but you're also streaming. So you need more core density. Yeah. So, but it always felt sort of like you were making an excuse for AMD. Like, sort of like, and the thing is, people really do play and stream. That's like a new form of gaming that I don't do. I'm an old person. Although you're a young hipster, Will, so you do it. But
look, I got a beard for streaming is the thing. I grew that thing out and I had to start doing something.
Did I miss fun material while I was in the bathroom?
We were just talking about the core density and how it used to be with when Ryzen first came out that you had to sort of, it felt like you were making excuses because core still kicked Ryzen butt in gaming, but then you're like, well, but if you're streaming. Like, whoa, I can get 8 cores and Intel, I'd have to buy $1,000 CPU for that. It's just like, that was like a game changer, but it still always felt like you were making an excuse for AMD,
Well, and if you're a professional streamer and you want your thing, you want your stream to look real good, the best way to do that until the NVEnc 2 stuff came out with the 3000 or 2000 series cards was to run the X264 software encoder, which will basically eat as much CPU as you throw at it at the higher quality settings. I guess.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm at the point, and this work from home for stuff. This may not last forever, but like I'm at the point where I'm taking like videos we need to post to the site and like running them through FFmpeg to encode them to something else. And like I'm dealing with ProRes files and like production quality stuff, like
all
fairly,
in the 7700K.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, right?
Yeah,
that's why I'm really feeling the itch at this point. Is like,
no, you should not wait. You should not wait.
Right. I'm not going to, but it's like, yeah, this is going to take like an hour and a half to encode into this insanely high bit rate because
plus think of it. I mean, the whole, like, if you waited for Zen 4, whatever, you're looking at really a new platform, new motherboard. You are going to have to do a new motherboard. You're going to have to buy DDR5, which I can tell you will not be cheaper than DDR4.
Well, sure. And also at launch, it'll be really slow too.
That's what I was going to say. And not only that, but like maybe there might be stability concerns. There might be kinks to iron out. Like getting in on the ground floor of a brand new platform and generation of memory and all that stuff maybe sounds a little dicey. So maybe like I'm so used to having to buy a new board and memory with every CPU anyway that like it's from Intel that it's kind of it's just the status quo for me. So I should really get one of these probably soon.
And Brad, the other thing to think about is when that new stuff lands and you decide you need that upgrade and you can use that, the old one can roll over into the home server, and
that's true.
You got a massive number of cores.
Oh my god, I can have a 12-core NAS.
Yeah,
holy crap. Okay, sold.
Does it work? Does it?
Gordon, I have one last CPU question for you. What's like when this situation happened with AMD last time? Intel a few years later, the Athlon was rising, and Intel came back with a massive performance boost with Core by both fixing their janky Pentium 4 business and like starting on this multi-threaded path that we're riding on now. But a lot of that was driven by process improvements, and there's not a lot of process improvements left to come. So like what's Intel's response to getting stopped? Like, do they care about this market still, you think, or is this a place where they're just going to cede this to the enthusiast PC market, to AMD, and lean into server metal and with Apple switching to their own ARM chips on mobile, which we still don't know how that's going to go, but it looks like it's going to be interesting at least. Yeah. Like, and NVIDIA owning the high end data center compute stuff now, it seems like I don't. Intel has to be worried about some of these markets. I don't know if they're going to be worried about all of them, but I'm curious what you think their response is going to be.
It's true because AMD had this in a presentation 3 years ago, 4 years. So they're basically saying in the past Intel would run away with process and smoke us, and they just see that slowing of Moore's law, not letting Intel do that anymore, and we're seeing that every day manifest itself. Intel basically, there's heavy talks of them hiring out TSMC as a fab, right?
Wow.
Which is insane.
That's bananas, given the money they spend on fabs.
I was going to say, they must have invested like untold billions in their own fabrication, right?
Yeah, they were talking about billions and billions of dollars in these fabs you got to pay for. And also, Intel, they are, a lot of people call them arrogant, but it's because they've been so good for so long, right?
40 years,
you're talking about somebody who's basically been the number one for 40 years of computing.
Yeah.
I have to believe that they will at some point pull it out, but sometimes, unlike before with Athlon 64, where AMD cleaned their clock for about 4 years, and then basically Intel put them in a box and we didn't see them for 10 years. I don't know. Sometimes I'm really kind of worried. I've been saying this for a while because I don't know I don't know if Intel can pull it out this time.
Well, it has to be like turning an aircraft carrier, right? Like it takes years for what they're doing now to actually manifest in the market, right? Like there must be huge lead times on this stuff.
But they are smart. I mean, the one thing is like people really just they just want to hate on the way the world of hardware is now. They just want to hate on. And I will say this: I'm a Warriors fan. I'm not a Patriots fan, but I know how Patriots fans are. People will hate you no matter what, and they want to hate on you.
I feel like that's just any enthusiast community at this point, right? Any enthusiast
community. But the reason why Intel, they are smart. They have generally the smartest people in the world. So I really think. I have to believe they will at some point pull it out, but like, it's certainly not like it used to be. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, like with the Core stuff, you could kind of see the writing on the wall and see that they were going to A, lean on process, and B, just go massively multi-threaded as fast as they could. But with this, I don't see, I mean, it could be that they go more SoC and start adding dedicated compute units and stuff like that to accelerate the specific workloads. There's a bazillion different things they could do. Yeah. And I'm, without the crutch of process to lean on, I'm really interested to see what happens.
Well, they've talked about this for a few years, but they haven't successfully pulled it off in any higher end part. But, they've got their EMIB, right? So they're basically going to be stacking parts, and the whole idea is like they've realized that monolithic dies are not going to work for them anymore. So let's just stack up parts.
Stuff a little bit.
So
people don't know.
I don't remember the exact name of the acronym, but basically it lets them say use 10 nanometer cores. We'll say the power circuit's made out of a 14 nanometer part, and then they just take the parts that they want and then they stack them
like Lego almost, or
like a Lego.
Sounds not entirely dissimilar to the chiplet stuff AMD's doing, like just modularize the design of the die.
Yeah, so it'll be modularized, and EMIB is a high speed mesh fabric type whatever. And they've actually done this with the original Kaby Lake G. That was one of the test platforms where they took a Kaby Lake quad core and they connected it with a Radeon core, and they basically used their EMIB to connect the two, right? So they could prove that we could do with the high speed interface all on the same socket or same chip package. And then of course the Radeon had HBM memory, so it was this weird Polaris Vega construction. But I do think they think that'll help them beyond Rocket Lake. There's rumors of an Alder Lake Park that I think is going to be like a Big Little construction. So I'm not sure where that plays out, but Intel is smart. Intel is a really, really smart company. Yeah, you don't get to 40 years of dominance because you just don't know out of luck. It's not out of luck.
As much as they seem like they're maybe lost in the woods a little bit right now, it seems like it would be foolish to write them off this soon.
Yeah.
So we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I want to make sure we talk about new GPUs a little bit, because there's interesting stuff happening on the Radeon side from AMD as well. And like I said, they announced this stuff last week. We don't have benchmarks or anything yet. The NDAs for that haven't expired yet. And I think you said you were firewalled from PC World's GPU coverage, so we can talk freely. But this is RDNA 2, the new Radeon 6000 series, and I'm like, it seems like the big change is that they've added ray tracing. Is that?
Well, I think more general, the bigger picture is the big change is that they are competitive in GPUs again, right? Like much like on the CPU side, it's like AMD actually matters in graphics cards for the first time in like how long?
Yeah, I mean they are claiming to compete with 3080, and some people think 3090. So, damn.
Yes, ray tracing is obviously the big new feature for them here.
Well, and these are the GPU. These are the same. This is the same graphics architecture that's driving both, or at least some subset of both of the new PC consoles.
Yes.
Yep. The new PCs. Yes.
The new living room PCs.
More PCs, especially this Xbox sure looks kind of like a PC case.
I wish my PC case was square and towery. That sounds like it'd be good.
Yeah.
They're unlike NVIDIA, who rolled their own API before DirectX, and the Vulkan APIs were quite ready for RTX stuff last year before. It seems like the AMD parts are both native for the Microsoft DirectX ray tracing API and
DXR,
the Vulkan API. Yeah.
So this was like kind of a big revelation to me, because like the headline coming out of this was like, oh, some of the current ray tracing enabled games on the market are not going to do ray tracing on these AMD cards right out of the gate. And like when you walk that back a little bit to understand why, it sounds like it's because they're doing NVIDIA proprietary stuff in software, which I just assumed they were to spec in Vulkan, if not DXR, but I guess NVIDIA was doing their own custom voodoo in there.
So yeah, like people haven't really, I went back and looked when we were talking about this before the start of the show, like Remedy doesn't say what API they're using for ray tracing control, because there was only one card when they released that game that could do ray tracing, so it kind of didn't matter. Right. It's like if you wanted to play GL Quake when the 3DFX Voodoo was the only card out, it didn't matter unless you had an SGI workstation.
Right. Like I was totally going to say this is sort of analogous to the 3DFX and Glide situation, right? Of games being kind of designed toward one specific piece of hardware, not 1-to-1, but it's kind of reminiscent of that.
Well, so the difference now, though, is that often the DirectX API follows whoever rolls the hardware out first.
Okay.
I mean, there'll be conversations with all involved parties, so AMD, NVIDIA, and Microsoft, and everybody who works in those worlds contributed. But my guess is at these high level APIs, generally the situation is that you're just doing math. So like it's a situation where you can either reformat the code for the ray tracing part of the program into the new API or dump it into a wrapper or something like that. And usually it's pretty performant.
I'm not
I don't know if that applies here, just for the record, but that's how it's worked in the past.
I'm not implying it's a problem in any way. I'm sure that those games will get backported. I just like knowing how things work.
I think your concerns are warranted because definitely it has been floated that a lot of, again, these were all DXR games and there was nothing proprietary. Obviously the DLSS part was going to be proprietary. And everybody had assumed that when you got a, say, an Intel or an AMD card that supported DXR, you would just flip on the switch and it would work too. But if these games are not going to work out of the box or easily with other DirectX ray tracing cards, it makes you wonder what exactly happened. So people should be concerned about that because, I would hope, people are more transparent about it. I mean, but it could be, This could be NVIDIA's GameWorks, right? This could be simply, hey, you know what? We know you don't care about this, but we will do the work for you. It's like, oh, really? You will do the work for us. They hand them the library, they use the library, and you use it, right?
Let me tell you, if NVIDIA called me and was like, hey, we'll add ray tracing to your game, I am literally I'm a small developer. I'm not making control or anything like that. But if somebody calls me and is like, hey, we'll give you an engineer for a few months to implement this feature, my hand is raised.
You're not going to say no.
No.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got the little quote snippets in front of me from AMD here on this issue, which is that they say that the Radeon 6000 series will support, quote, all ray tracing titles using industry-based standards. That's obviously DXR and Vulkan.
Well, that's always been their position. Like they always go with the industry standard at AMD, which is a good thing.
But also they added that they won't support, quote, proprietary ray tracing APIs and extensions. So there's obviously something NVIDIA specific there that they're referring to.
My guess is that going forward, this is much less of an issue than it is for older games.
I mean, realistically, we're talking about like practically single-digit numbers.
Literally two games, because like the Call of Duty Modern Warfare ray tracing extensions didn't matter. We're talking about Control and maybe Metro Exodus,
right?
The only, and
maybe
then
Shadow Tomb Raider,
Quake 2 RTX, and the Minecraft RTX thing that NVIDIA paid for.
Oh, I've got to get Minecraft RTX. The Quake 2 RTX was the first thing I played on my 3080, and like I was just drooling all over myself. Like I could not believe what I was seeing. But
here's my question to both of you. So, because what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of yelling. You're going to see a lot of gnashing of teeth over, oh my God, NVIDIA is doing its proprietary thing again. This is not fair. Blah, yeah. That'll be the normal, complaint you will see out there. Do you think that is all that? Do you think that's a little unfair? Because if NVIDIA, like Will said, if NVIDIA says, "Hey, we're gonna do it for you. We're gonna do the work for you that you would otherwise not do," shouldn't they benefit from that?
Totally. They were first to market with hardware ray tracing capability. Like they absolutely should exploit that. I'm not like criticizing in any way. It's more just an assessment of like what games are going to work on this new card and which ones aren't, and what's it going to be like going forward. And I assume going forward, 100% of games coming out will work on both.
My assumption is going forward, almost everything except for Xbox exclusives are going to be written in Vulkan, which will be cross-platform.
Right.
Because I mean that if you're building stuff for PS4, if you're building stuff for Xbox, if you're building stuff for PC, Vulkan means you write that code and then you don't worry about it, is my understanding. And if there's graphics programmers in the audience that I know Sony has their own thing that is like an extension.
They roll their own graphics libraries as far as I know. But
is that realistic though? Because I mean, I've always thought Vulkan was 1 out of 50 versus 99.
I keep expecting Vulkan to take over because of the cross-platform nature of it, and it kind of like Doom uses Vulkan to great effect, right? But Doom is the one Vulkan game that I have played on the reg over the last 5 years. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I mean, DXR is the no-brainer for PC and Xbox, right?
Yeah, but I just feel like it's just so much. There's almost so much gravity with DirectX and the tools and Microsoft and PCs and and Xbox that I just can't imagine who would do Vulkan except for people who want to support those third party, or I don't even, what's the politically nice way to say Linux and BSD people these days, but is there a correct
cranks is what we usually know. We like Linux and BSD people.
And
Brad
beards.
and I both have BSD machines running in I have multiple BSD machines running in this house.
And you have a beard.
I
have a sick gray beard. Yeah.
I am constantly Google searching for answers to the very, very minute differences between BSD and Linux versions of everything. And it's not, let's just not
I do
get
like
into
how
it.
BSD and Linux people like to yell at each other, though.
Look, I'm moving my BSD machine to Proxmox so I can just put a bunch of Linux VMs on it and call it a day.
But the funny thing is, to us, like dirty Windows peasants, it's like you're both the same. We don't understand. Like
You're all
what?
lunatics.
It's like that episode of Star Trek where the one had the face right, the white face on the right, and the left on like reversed. It
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what heretical denomination you ascribe to. You're
both case sensitive OSs. We don't understand.
Look, I can tab complete. It doesn't matter, Gordon.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the thing to remember about Linux and BSD is that you spend like 4 years kind of going cross-eyed every time you have to fix something, and then eventually it just clicks and you understand. It's like speaking another language.
It's like,
really?
It's honestly that moment every time it happens is worth all of the toil and the heartbreak, because like it feels like magic when it's like, oh my God, I feel like it's like in D&D how you have to like learn your spells, and they like exist in your brain, and then you cast the magic.
Grease, yeah.
It's just like, wow, I learned a magic spell at some point without realizing it. Now I can just do this incantation. But
I have to admit, I haven't tried it since the 1990s. So.
It's way better than installing Slackware from floppy disk. It's come a long way for sure. But the last thing I was going to say, I mean, we're getting off topic a little bit here, but the last thing about graphics APIs I was going to say is, it seems like the X factor there, from the little bit I know about it, is that the new Unreal Engine stuff, that Epic is kind of moving away from hardware graphics APIs entirely and starting to try to do more stuff back in software again. Just some of the stuff
with their massive poly counts and all that stuff.
Yeah, all their virtualized geometry and stuff like that. It sounds like that. And like there's a Tim Sweeney talk from 10 years ago where he's talking about getting away from the hardware, the GPU graphics APIs, and moving back to software. And it seems like that's actually the direction they're going now. So I'm getting in over my head here. I'm just getting a bunch of blank stares here. So we'll revisit that topic later.
Yeah, we'll just chop this bit out. It's fine.
If you take it out, then I can't look prescient when everybody's saying this in a year or two.
I mean, let's talk about. Okay, so there's a couple of things that these cards do that everybody else isn't really doing. I mean, first off, AMD is the only one with a PCIe 4 implementation on the motherboard side, right? Because there's no PCIe 4 on Intel. Is that
correct? I think Rocket Lake has it in.
Yeah, Rocket Lake is rumored to have it.
It's supposed to come next spring, but
okay, it will happen.
Does that it doesn't seem like that matters right now. Is that fair?
I don't think it has mattered. It's just like the old, like every time, I need by 16 PCIe 3 because it's so much better than by 16 PCIe 2, and I don't think anything is really soaking up all of that bandwidth that you're getting out of PCIe 4 graphics.
The Ampere cards support PCIe 4, right?
Yes, those are PCIe 4, and I will say one of the things to wrap it a little bit back to Zen 3, as I said, like, look, if you go from your ridiculous 2080 Ti card to a 3080, you will actually see an increase in performance on Zen. They didn't say if that was necessarily PCIe 4 at all, but my guess is for most consumer applications, it's not making a difference. It hasn't. It just hasn't. I wish it would, but again, are you going to be a developer that's going to make a game you can sell to 5 people?
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm sitting here looking at 3080 benchmarks between PCIe 3 and 4, and it's not a big difference at all.
It seems like the PCIe stuff is maybe going to make more difference when the direct storage APIs start coming online next year, the year after.
For sure.
And there's actually a use case for all. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if we see video cards in the next few years that have slots for SSDs.
Yeah, would that be weird? I remember AMD actually showed that off 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had it was a high-end compute card that had M.2. It had local storage.
Right. Oh, that's wild. Yeah. Oh, that would be cool as hell. This is another question kind of in this vein about the new Radeons. Any thought on this smart access memory, which is what they're calling this, like, kind of little bandwidth boost, only if you have a Zen 3 and a Radeon 6000. It's almost like I see people referring to it as like an RPG set bonus. If you have both AMD parts, you get this little boost.
The McDLT.
Yeah, I don't know any details of it. I was trying to figure out, like, well, what is this? Because it's basically the way it works is your CPU has to communicate with the GPU through a very small window. They say typically it's 256 megs. This would allow the CPU to access basically all of the memory on the graphics card, only with SAM, right? So,
yeah.
it sounds like a lot of people sort of thinking that it's, bar or base address register, some part of PCIe, but it's not really clear to me what it is. They also did say that it's something they hadn't told any developers about. So I think it could be pretty cool, because if you think about it, this could be performance boost for them. It also could be something that is already well being used in Xbox, PlayStation. And I also think that what's interesting to me is where this could go, which is, so if your CPU is accessing whatever is in the graphics card's memory, is there a certain point where, you know what, why don't we just let the graphics card memory controller call most of the plays, right? And then maybe the CPU just does whatever housekeeping with the system DRAM. But then you start to think like, well, we look at Xbox. Isn't the Xbox and PlayStation architected that way? There's a single memory controller for the x86 cores as well as their graphics cores. Why in the world do you need that memory control in the CPU, right? Why don't we just let the CPU do that?
Interesting. Should we talk about DLSS a little bit? I feel like this is the other big differentiator between the AMD cards and the NVIDIA cards. And like when DLSS rolled out a couple of years ago with the 2000 series, it kind of sounded like snake oil.
Yeah.
And the TLDR, if you don't know what DLSS is, basically they do a ton of frame analysis and machine learning stuff to build a machine learning model to super sample, which can then be used either to upscale low resolution stuff to play like games at now 8K apparently, or to increase image quality as if you were doing super sampling, AA, anti-aliasing, without the 4x performance hit that you get by doing actual super sampling. And the upshot is at 1080p, 1440p, 4K, and 8K. At 1080p, you can get increased visual quality. At 4K and 1440p, you can run at like 1080p frame rates with much higher resolutions. And like looking at the image quality comparisons and actually using it in person, it doesn't feel like snake oil anymore.
No. I'm with you. I wrote this feature off until I tried it myself, and like, holy crap.
Well, and it feels like the reason it doesn't feel like snake oil is you might have you might have an increase in like weird glitches occasionally where the machine learning kind of fails in interesting ways, but more than that, it smooths out the frame rate in such a way that like if you're sensitive to micro stutter and to frame rate hitches, it's magic. Like you're trading a little bit of image fidelity for a lot of frame rate stability, and it seems like an increasingly big deal, especially if you're playing at 4K. Realistically, nobody's playing at 8K for the next several years on these cards, but at 4K, which I think is something that we should address and is like a place that people are going to be playing games over the next 2-3 years, it really makes a difference.
Well, even at 1440p, like just in the couple weeks since I got my 3080, I've been messing with it. Like in Control, I did some side by side, and I was hard pressed to tell the difference between the DLSS 1440p.
You have to pause the game and get into photo mode and stuff like that, and do zoom ins and things like that in my experience to see the difference
between native 1440p and whatever it was rendering at with the DLSS on, which was like 1700 by something, so like dramatically lower than actual native resolution. I basically couldn't tell the difference, except that the frame rate was smoother.
Except for the frame rate is like butter. So you can tell in GeForce Experience, if you have an NVIDIA card, you can flip on the performance meter now, and they show you the 99% frame time, which is like it shows you what your average frame rate is with the fastest 99% of frames. So you see where your sags are better, and it shows up a lot there. AMD doesn't. Like this hardware has the compute cores to do a DLSS equivalent, but they don't have a solution ready. And it seems like to implement this, there needs to be both back-end machine learning stuff set up on the AMD side, where they can run these games on these massive compute clusters and generate really high frames, and basically, run through every part of the game over and over and over again until they get enough data to let the machine learning algorithms fill in the gaps based on the context of what's around those pixels. Because basically what they're doing is taking one pixel and turning it into 4, right? I think I would not have said that this was a weakness before, and I feel like it maybe is after spending some time with the 3080 cards
the
DLSS 2 stuff.
It's probably worth noting. I don't know if you saw that blog post Microsoft put up about the RDNA 2 features in the Series X.
This is the one where they said basically is this in response to the RDNA 2 being the DirectX compatible, Xbox compatible.
This was their kind of chest beating, like we're the only console in the market with full RDNA 2 spec implemented, which kind of meaningless because obviously Sony is just doing their own thing to achieve equivalence. But the reason I bring it up is there is a phrase in here where they refer to improved visual quality via techniques such as machine learning powered super resolution, which has to be the same thing, right? That's same basically thing. But that's lowercase, so that's not like their fancy name for a feature that they are coming up with to compete with DLSS, but it sounds like they're working on it.
And I think AMD has actually talked about a super resolution feature, right? So that's
they said it's coming,
leveraging that. Yeah,
they said it's coming and it'll run on this hardware. It's just not there yet.
Just not at launch. Okay.
I mean, I assume it requires partnership, because they're going to have to build hooks into the game to be able to render on the compute clusters at those high resolutions and to play the game in an automated way. Like there has to be some back end work done, and this is an instance where NVIDIA spending a ton of money on DevRel makes a big difference for the number of games that support this. But I mean, it almost even with DLSS 1 and 2, there's still only a handful of it's like Watch Dogs and Control and Death Stranding and maybe Metro were the ones that kind of mattered in the beginning. And I think Valhalla maybe supports it as well, but it's not like every game comes out and supports DLSS.
I wonder though how this plays out, because I've heard this from other people too. In my own brand is like, DLSS 2.0 is no joke. It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And it is a serious peg plus for buying an NVIDIA card or an AMD card. I do wonder how it plays out in the long term, though, because it's very dependent on game developers. So if you have Xbox, it's like if you're doing super resolution for Xbox, you might as well just throw in the PC version too. Doesn't this? It seems to me that it'll play out for AMD in the end.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It'll be very similar to
that's a good point.
FreeSync and G-Sync battles, right?
Yeah,
G-Sync was clearly superior, but FreeSync was cheaper, and everybody did it.
And
so,
open.
And open, sort of open.
Sort of.
But in the end, FreeSync sort of won, but until NVIDIA flipped them on their back and called it, it's G-Sync compatible. Is it FreeSync?
So
No, it's FreeSync compatible. Okay, I want FreeSync compatible. I want G-Sync.
It's like a marketing masterstroke that even FreeSync monitors are just branded as G-Sync compatible. Just
imagine waking up let me read the paper. Like, hey, where's all our FreeSync monitors? They're all marked as G-Sync now. I mean, it's
these Asus monitors I just got are only FreeSync, but they just had a giant fat G-Sync sticker on them when I got them. Like that's like a coup that they pulled off.
So you have to respect that.
Well, and then the other thing I wonder is for stuff like live games, like Fortnite supports DLSS now, and it means that you can turn on the new ray tracing features in Fortnite and get a playable frame rate on a 3080. But like Fortnite's a live game, Epic is constantly changing assets in that game, and I wonder what overhead it adds for the developer in terms of like how early do they have to have that stuff ready before they can push it out. And I know being like a massive multi-platform game like Fortnite is, like they have to worry about everything from the Switches and the PS4 and the Xbox's qual process, but still like you're in a situation where like they can't just dump a patch out that changes a bunch of assets and change everything over to Halloween skins, because that's going to mess up the DLSS presumably, and they're going to have to retrain all those algorithms. So like it's going to, we said this at the beginning of the show, it's a real weird few years for benchmarking, because on one hand you have like some magical, mystical, we're going to machine learning this shit up, but it actually works. And then on the other hand, who knows what ray tracing does to benchmarks, and like all bets are kind of off. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the nice thing about CPU testing is it's pretty clear. I spend less time doing this encode, or I do spend less time doing a render. Graphics people have it really hard, because I do feel like visual quality is going to play into this again.
Yeah.
Because, you've got ray tracing, you've got VRS as well. So, like, what part is what vendor, sort of giving you worse graphics on, So
yeah, it's a lot more subjective for them than just your world of just hard numbers and time spans and stuff, right?
I remember the hours I spent in the old days at Maximum PC talking to the art designers about using nearest neighbor upresing when I was giving them these really low res quincunx versus super sampling AA shots. And I was like, look, you got to nearest neighbor this, or else it's good. You're gonna bilinearly filter out all of the difference in the pictures, and they're gonna look exactly the same. And then we'd get the fucking magazine back, and because it's a print thing, the dots are only so small, it was blurred out anyway. It was a complete
it didn't matter.
The YouTube guys have it so easy. That's all I'm saying.
Do you think though it's going to get back to the visual quality wars of those days where they would so for those who are not old timers, ATI and NVIDIA would snipe at each other saying your AA sucks. And look at this.
Or like color rendering. They would complain about color rendering back in the day. Your colors are washed out. Don't get the washed out colors. I mean, I think that the thing that's changed is that the worlds are so visually complex now, and because the pipelines are fully programmable in ways that weren't back then. It's really up to the art directors and the designers of the games what they look like, and like we're not. I think the challenge is, does AMD's DLSS implementation or Microsoft's DLSS implementation deliver the same kind of frame rate smoothing at the resolutions people actually play games at, less than how like you're going to be able to snipe jank out of these machine learning upscaling algorithms wherever you like. If you pause the game, get loaded up into photo mode and start looking around, you're going to be able to find weird stuff where the machine learning does weird machine learning stuff. Right. And there's not going to be any rhyme or reason to it because machine learning is weird often. And I don't think there's going to be a clear victor no matter what in that space, I guess. I think it's you're going to look at performance and you're going to say, okay, this one, the 99% frame rate is here. This one, it's here. I think this one's probably better this go around.
Gordon had a really good point though about the consoles, specifically the Xbox being AMD based, since it's DirectX compatible, that a lot of stuff will trickle down from consoles back to PC for the AMD hardware, because that's just how it works. Like consoles kind of dictate development for everything.
Well, and it seems like there's a benefit to having what is essentially the native DirectX GPU, right? Like if you want to play the big games that are coming out on consoles, it seems like this maybe is the right choice, DLSS aside. We have Brad, I know you have just a couple minutes left.
Should we just quickly run through the models?
Yeah, I think we should do that.
There's what is it, 6800 XT and 6900 XT.
Yeah.
Do those map pretty cleanly to 3070, 80, and 90?
It seems we don't know performance yet. I mean, we know the performance they said. AMD is generally pretty reliable on that, but I'd like to wait until the actual benchmarks land, and we don't have these cards. The memory bus is the same on all three cards, which is really a trip. I wasn't able to find memory clocks. Everybody was talking about megatextures per second and bandwidth. I mean, I could have done the clock math, but it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was putting together the show notes last night after watching all the election stuff, and I wasn't capable of that.
Steve Kornacki is not the only one who can't do math.
Look, it's math. Doing live math is hard, but the prices are the 6800 is $580. It's got 3840 shader units. The XT is 4608 shader units for $650, and the 6900 is $1,000 for 5100 shader units. The compute cores are they jump from 60 to 72 to 80, and that's the place that I'm kind of interested to see what the impact is. I think you're going to do either of the 6800s are going to be fine at your 1080p's, your 1440p's, and probably when they get their DLSS equivalent online at 4K as well for single player stuff, especially. Like if you're playing single player stuff at 4K 30, you're going to be fine on any of these cards. The 6900 feels like a card that shoots the gap between the 3080 and 3090 on paper, and I don't
and in price for that matter.
And in price,
$1,000.
I don't know. I'm super interested to see what the benchmarks look like on that. I bet it's a real low. I bet it's a part that they if you're going to spend that much money, you're probably going to buy a 3090 and go all the way.
Sure.
But I mean, the 3090 has a lot of weird overhead. You got to have it's pretty much the maximum size for a PCI Express card. It's you need a giant power supply for that thing. It's a big chonker, maybe, and it takes up 2.5, 3 slots. So maybe since this is a normal size card, maybe that's the argument, is if you need the most power that'll fit in your mini ITX case, here's your best bet.
Sure.
Yeah, less power. I do think that the RX 6900 XT is the most disruptive of those, because
agreed. Yeah.
I think NVIDIA really did sort of price that 3090, probably not expecting AMD to be as close as they claim they are. So I think the 6900 XT if it's 98% the performance of a 3090, then a lot of people are going to say, well, why do I want a 3090, right? So
I think even if it's 90, like if it's 33% of the price for 80-90% of the performance, and you're not doing heavy metal, realistically, the 3090 is a card for people who want to play games at ridiculous resolutions, professional streamers, and like hardware
machine
nerds.
learning scientists.
Yeah, machine learning scientists, stuff like that.
That's really it's sort of pitched for that. It was priced at a price where they thought, no one's going to buy this. But I think that's where AMD did most of their messing with NVIDIA. The other parts are probably correctly priced to compete, and I think the prices sort of tell you about where they're going to perform. They'll be right there with their equivalent cards, and they were going to expect that NVIDIA might cut prices a little bit, or maybe just it'll be more attractive.
That's really the thing to me here on both fronts, CPU and graphics. It's just great to see AMD come out swinging again after so long.
Oh yeah,
because we needed more competition in that space for pricing, for feature development, for availability, for that matter. Like it's nice that these AMD cards are pretty good, apparently, in a world where nobody can get their hands on a 3080 right now.
Yeah, they're very confident that they are back. They are going to be swinging with at NVIDIA.
This is just
part. So
better for everybody.
I mean, as we saw with Intel, it would be nice if we got to that with NVIDIA, but I don't think we're there yet, because NVIDIA is not in the place Intel has been. So I think NVIDIA they're always 4 steps ahead of everybody, it feels like.
Well, totally, their R&D pipeline is deep and well funded. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. I guess that'll wrap it up for us. As always, this is the part of the show where we thank our patrons, the wonderful people who make the show possible every week. And thanks to all. Let's see, we're at, hold on. We are at
drumroll
1,259 patrons now. So thank you to all 1,259 of the wonderful people who make the show possible.
I just heard the little Windows ta-da sound in my head when you said that.
But a special thanks to our executive producer tier patrons, Jacob Chappell, Andrew Cotton, and David Allen. As always, an extra special thanks to Julian for taking care of the transcripts for the Tech Pod for us. If you would like to read the Tech Pod, machine translated with the help of our good friend Julian, you can. They're on the page at techpod.content.town. And please tell your deaf or hard of hearing friends. And let us know if you're using the transcripts so that we know whether it's worth continuing to do them. Thanks, Julian. If you would like to know how to join the TechPod Discord, the fabulous and well-informed tech. Hey, Brad, there's a new channel.
Oh,
wait, no, that was the other Discord.
Well, now you have to make that. What was the channel in the other Discord?
The other Discord has a booze and drinking channel, which isn't like my jam, but people are really into it.
Okay.
I was thinking about adding a parenting channel, because we don't have a parenting channel, and there's a lot of
worst
parents.
idea.
Yeah.
We have a food channel where occasional whiskey talk pops up, so that's fine. But
that's true.
Parenting would go well right under work and career stuff.
That's true.
I would say
that's a grown-up conversation.
That's right.
For grown-up places. I've been enjoying the movies and TV channel that you added a couple weeks ago, though. That's been nice for me to come and talk about my Star Wars business.
It's a nice hangout at a time when people need a place to hang out.
Your Star Wars business.
How do you feel about the Mando, Gordon?
I like it. I feel it's everything. If you could take every movie made since the end of Return of the Jedi and just basically blast them into the Sarlacc pit, and we just had the Mandalorian, I would be totally fine with that. It satisfies the whole Star Wars craving. I mean, the closest thing it's probably gotten to me is Rogue One, the end of Rogue One. Anyway, I mean, that was really very Star. It didn't. Not everything has to be about Han, Luke, and Leia, and I think it really does it well.
Agreed.
So
if you want to find out about the TechPod Discord, how to back the Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. That's patreon.com/techpod. Gordon, this is the part of the show where we plug things. Where can people find you?
You can find me over at pcworld.com, and also you can catch our live show, The Full Nerd, on YouTube, Twitch, and we do that live, so we take questions. It's awesome because you can actually have conversations with us in real time on YouTube, and they're reasonable conversations.
What?
I'm going to say that. Reasonable conversations on YouTube live with people. Yes.
What is this? What is this promised land you have discovered? Bring me there.
Yeah.
If people want to find you on Twitter or anything like that, are you still doing social media?
Oh, yeah.
It's just getting disengaged?
I do have what is it? I think I have no idea because I don't know how to use Twitter. Never got the manual, but I think it's Gordon @GordonUng.
Okay.
On Twitter.
Very good. Gordon, thank you so much.
Check.
Yeah, thank you for letting us pick your brain.
That's right, because there's actually an actual person who has Gordon Maung on Twitter who's not me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have that problem on Twitter. I managed to nail that one, but
you got in early.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming by, Gordon. We'll have to have you on again sometime. This was really fun.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Like, I feel like I should get you to yell it. So I was hoping I was going to ask you about the Mandalorian. You were going to start yelling, but I guess.
No, it's so clever. It's so clever, you know. And it just
have you looked at how they do the way they shoot that thing works? Have you watched any of the behind the scenes on that?
I haven't, but I was talking to my friend who was looking for like media advice on how to pitch the thing she's doing, and she says we're actually doing it. They're not doing the Mandalorian because they're still doing post effects. So,
well, it's the behind the scenes on Disney Plus for the first season of The Mandalorian shows how the volume works and how they use Unreal to like change backgrounds and stuff live, and how they get all those reflections on. It's unbelievable. It's magic. It's super cool. But thank you so much for coming by. Everybody should check out Gordon at PC World and The Full Nerd. And we will see you all next week. Bye, everybody.